Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to Point Pleasant, New Jersey.
Oh,
It's a really fascinating case, and there's a lot of twists and turns, so buckle up.
yeah, I've heard about this one. I'm excited.
Yeah, we've got an interview with Carolyn Burroughs, and some court transcripts, and of course, a bunch of newspaper articles.
Okay, sounds like we've got a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, so this is going to be a three-parter, I think.
Oh, wow.
It's a disappearance, but it's also about this really complicated father-daughter relationship.
Huh.
Daniel Sr. and his daughter Carolyn.
Yeah, family dynamics can add a whole other layer to these cases for sure.
Yeah.
Makes it even more interesting.
So let's start with Carolyn's childhood.
Okay.
She describes her father, Daniel Sr., as this really charismatic guy, in public,
Right.
but at home, like, completely different.
Oh, really?
Like, cold and distant.
Oh, wow. So two different sides to this guy?
Yeah, and in her interview, she talks about feeling really emotionally neglected by him, almost like she and her brother were just an afterthought to him.
That's got to be tough, especially for a young kid.
Yeah, and to make things worse, he would just disappear from their lives.
Oh, wow.
Like the first time when Carolyn was only 6 or 7 years old.
So really young.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
There were all these rumors about infidelity,
Okay.
and then just like that he was gone.
Wow, just up and left.
Yeah.
That's got to be hard to process, especially at that age.
Yeah, and this wasn't a one-time thing either.
Yeah.
He briefly came back into the picture when Carolyn was 13.
Oh, okay.
So, there was like a glimmer of hope that maybe they could have a normal, father-daughter relationship.
Right.
But it was short-lived. Like after a couple of months, he was gone again.
Jeez. Talk about whiplash.
I know, right?
So how did that affect her, all this back and forth?
Well, she talks a lot about developing this like deep-seated fear of abandonment
That makes sense.
and having a really hard time trusting people and depending on others.
Yeah, those early experiences can really leave a mark,
Oh,
shape how you see the world.
Yeah, yeah. And then years later, there was this family reunion.
No?
It was orchestrated by Daniel Sr.'s new wife, Loretta.
Okay.
And, it seemed like a chance for healing. At
Jimmy.
least initially, they were having barbecues and karaoke nights.
Oh, wow.
Boat trips. Boat trips, yeah, for a couple of years, things seemed to be going pretty well.
So what happened? What changed?
Well, Loretta's role in all of this is really interesting. On the surface, she seems like she's trying to bring the family together.
Right.
Like genuinely cares.
Yeah, playing the part of the peacemaker.
Exactly. But as we dig deeper into this story, we're going to see a much more complex picture emerge.
Okay, color me intrigued. What's the next chapter in this family saga?
Well, in 2007, Daniel Sr. pulls his disappearing act again.
Oh, no, not again.
And this time it's a lot more suspicious.
What makes you say that? How is this time different?
Well, Loretta claims that Daniel Sr. was last seen getting into this yellow Hummer with another woman.
A yellow Hummer. That's pretty specific.
Yeah, but a lot of things about that story just don't add up.
Like what? Give me some examples.
For starters, Daniel Sr. had just had rotator cuff surgery.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, he had his arm in a sling.
Okay, so he wasn't exactly running off with someone then, was he?
Exactly, and he also left behind all of his prized possessions.
Gilly. Everything.
Yeah, we're talking boats, motorcycles, his drum set that he loved.
That is strange.
Like everything.
This doesn't sound like the same guy who just took off before, does it?
Right. Like this
Yeah.
wasn't the impulsive man who had abandoned his family in the past. This was a man who, at least on the surface, seemed to be planning for the future.
Yeah, something's fishy here.
Carolyn and her Uncle Raymond were immediately suspicious.
I bet.
They knew Daniel Sr. would never just leave all of that stuff behind, especially not his most cherished belongings.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
And as they started pressing Loretta for answers,
I bet you didn't like that too much.
she became really evasive. Like she refused to answer the door when they came knocking.
Oh, wow.
And she just started selling off all of Daniel Sr.'s stuff.
Really?
Like almost like she was trying to erase any trace of him.
That does sound suspicious, almost like she was trying to cover her tracks.
Exactly. And Carolyn tried to stop her legally, tried to get her to stop selling his things, but she hit a wall.
Why? What happened?
Loretta had power of attorney.
Ah, I see.
Which, can you explain what that means in this context?
Sure. Power of attorney is basically a legal document that gives someone the authority to act on behalf of another person, for financial or legal matters.
So Loretta had the power to make decisions about Daniel Sr.'s stuff even though he was missing.
Right, which in this case meant she could sell off his belongings even though his daughter and brother were against it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it looked like she was profiting from his disappearance.
yeah, this is not looking good for Loretta.
So at this point, there's no body, there's no concrete evidence. The case goes cold.
Oh, wow.
Years pass with no answers, and you can only imagine how frustrating and helpless Carolyn must have felt.
I can only imagine that must have been agonizing.
But then in 2013, there's a new development.
Oh,
The Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office sets up a cold case unit,
okay, good.
and Daniel Sr.'s case lands on their radar.
Finally some movement.
And remember those convictions that Loretta had for embezzlement and theft?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, they came back to haunt her.
Oh, so.
Because now the investigators are looking into her past financial dealings.
Okay.
And things are about to take a very dark turn.
Oh, boy. This is where it gets really interesting.
Hold on tight.
I'm ready. Tell me more. What did they find?
You'll have to wait till part 2 to find that out.
Oh, come on. You can't leave me hanging like that.
I know, but trust me, it's worth the wait.
All right. All right, I'll be counting down the minutes till part 2.
Great, we'll see you then. All right, so where we left off, investigators are at Loretta's place, and they're looking into Daniel Sr.'s disappearance. But she's got those past convictions, embezzlement and theft.
Right, right.
So what did they find when they searched her home?
Okay, well, they were going through her house, and they started noticing this smell.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this faint but, pretty distinct odor coming from a back closet.
Oh, that can't be good.
And they find, get this, they find 9 trash bags hidden under, piles of blankets and air fresheners.
9 trash bags. What was in them?
Well, inside the bags were 2 large plastic containers.
Okay, and what was in the containers?
Daniel Sr.'s remains.
Oh my gosh, she had his body all this time.
Yeah, dismembered and stored in her closet for 6 years.
6 years. Did they say if she moved with those containers?
Yeah, apparently she moved twice with those containers.
Wow, that's horrifying.
Yeah, it's a pretty gruesome discovery.
So what did the medical examiner determine was the cause of death?
Multiple stab wounds.
Oh my gosh, so it wasn't just a disappearance, it was a murder.
Right.
Did they say anything about where the stab wounds were or anything like that?
Yeah, they said the cut marks on his ribs were consistent with him being stabbed and then dismembered.
So she stabbed him first and then dismembered his body.
That's what it looks like.
Oh, that's awful. Did she try to explain any of this? How did she explain having his body in her closet?
She claimed self-defense.
Self-defense after 6 years.
Yeah, she said that Daniel Sr. had attacked her during an argument, and she only stabbed him after he, pushed her into a bathtub or something.
That doesn't sound very convincing.
Right, and the evidence didn't really support her claims.
Yeah, if it was self-defense, why go through all the trouble of dismembering the body and hiding it for years?
Exactly, and remember the whole power of attorney situation.
Right.
That doesn't really scream self-defense, does it?
Not really. It sounds more like she had this whole scenario planned out.
It does, doesn't it? The forged power of attorney, selling off his belongings, the cover-up.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a crime of passion.
No, it sounds like a carefully orchestrated plan.
So they arrested her and charged her with murder, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they charged her with Daniel Sr.'s murder and hindering apprehension.
Wow, and what about Carolyn? Was she part of any of this?
Well, Carolyn couldn't bring herself to attend the trial or even her father's funeral,
Oh, that's understandable.
but she did follow the case closely.
Yeah.
She was really eager for some kind of resolution.
Of course, after all these years.
Yeah, it was a huge media sensation. Everyone was talking about it.
So what happened at the trial?
Well, the prosecution presented a really strong case.
Okay.
They pointed out all of Loretta's inconsistent statements, the forged power of attorney, the suspicious circumstances surrounding Daniel Sr.'s death.
Right.
They even brought up her past convictions for embezzlement and theft.
Oh, to show a pattern.
Exactly, like she was capable of deception and had a potential financial motive.
So what did the defense say?
They tried to paint Daniel Sr. as this aggressive and abusive husband.
Oh, trying to discredit him.
Yeah, but the jury didn't buy it.
I can see why.
The evidence, especially the cover-up, it all pointed to premeditation.
Right.
And the fact that she sold off all his belongings so quickly after he disappeared, it just made it look like she was profiting from his death.
Yeah. So what was the verdict?
Guilty
Wow. Oh.
of murder and hindering apprehension.
And what was the sentence?
55 years in prison.
Wow. 55 years. That's a long time.
It is.
So justice was served, case closed, right?
Well, Not
What do
exactly.
you mean? What else is there?
Well, remember, Daniel Sr. wasn't Loretta's first husband.
Wait, she was married before.
Oh, yeah. And her second husband died under some pretty suspicious circumstances back in 1994.
Oh, come on. Are you serious? This just keeps getting more and more complicated.
I know, right?
So, who was this other husband? And how does he fit into all of this?
Well, his name was Joseph Doyle, and that's a story for part 3 of our deep dive.
Oh, man, you're killing me with these cliffhangers.
I know, but trust me, you won't want to miss this.
All right. I'll be back for part 3. So, last time we were talking about Loretta's second husband, Joseph Doyle, right?
That's right.
And he died, I think you said, back in 1994.
Yeah, 1994, and at the time they ruled it a drug overdose.
But even back then, there were people who thought it was suspicious.
Oh, yeah, there were always whiskers, especially from his family.
What did they say? Why didn't they believe it was an overdose?
Well, they insisted that he didn't have a drug problem.
Hmm.
They were really shocked when the autopsy found traces of Percocet and Xanax in his system.
Wow, so they really didn't think that he was using drugs at all.
Nope, not at all.
And the timing of his death is a little odd too, right?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I mean, it was just a few years before she got back together with Daniel Sr.
Right, so you have to wonder if maybe she, had a motive.
Yeah, especially now that we know she's capable of murder.
It definitely makes you rethink the whole situation.
It does. Do we know anything about what Loretta was doing around the time of Joseph's death?
Unfortunately, the sources we have don't really go into detail about that period.
Oh, that's too bad.
But, even without those specific details, there are still some pretty unsettling parallels between Joseph's death and Daniel Sr.'s murder.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Both husbands died under, well, let's just say, questionable circumstances.
Right. And both of their deaths could have potentially benefited Loretta financially.
Exactly. And you've got loved ones on both sides who suspected foul play.
That can't be just a coincidence, can it?
It's a very chilling thought, isn't it?
It is. So, is there any evidence that connects Loretta to Joseph's death?
Nothing concrete, unfortunately.
Mm.
But, the similarities they're hard to ignore.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if maybe the initial investigation wasn't as thorough as it could have been.
Right, because they probably weren't really looking at her as a suspect back then.
Exactly.
It's really sad for Joseph's family. They're left with all these unanswered questions and this lingering suspicion that justice might never really be served.
It really is. It must be incredibly frustrating for them.
It makes you think about how many other cases like this are out there.
You know where the truth is hidden, and the person responsible is never held accountable.
Exactly. So what's happening with the investigation into Joseph's death now? Are they looking at it again?
Yeah, they've reopened the case.
Oh, okay.
They're re-examining the evidence in light of Loretta's conviction, but it's hard to say if it'll be enough to charge her.
We'll have to wait and see.
We will.
Throughout this whole deep dive, I've been thinking about Carolyn a lot.
Yeah, she's been through a lot, hasn't she?
She really has, but she seems like such a strong person.
She is, and I think a lot of that strength comes from her mother, Carol.
Oh, yeah, she was amazing.
She really was. She created such a stable and loving environment for Carolyn and her brother.
Yeah, such a contrast to the instability and neglect they experienced with their father.
Absolutely. Carol really held the family together.
She did. She worked so hard to provide for them.
She really did. Attending every school function, always there to support her kids, all while working long hours to make ends meet.
She's like a true hero in this whole story.
I think so too.
It's really inspiring to see that even in the midst of all this darkness, there can be love and resilience.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the human spirit.
And I think Carolyn's decision to not attend the trial or the funeral was really powerful too.
Yeah, I agree. It was her way of protecting herself.
Yeah, and prioritizing her own healing.
Exactly.
Sometimes I think, the answers we're looking for can be more painful than the questions.
I think you're right. Sometimes it's better to focus on moving forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the case of Daniel Burrows, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think Carolyn's story really highlights how complex family relationships can be.
Yeah.
And it shows the lasting impact that childhood experiences can have on us.
Yeah.
But it also shows the potential for resilience, even in the face of terrible tragedy.
That's true. It's a story that really makes you think.
It does. It makes you think about the choices we make and the ripple effects they have on others.
Yeah. And it reminds us that sometimes the truth can be elusive.
And that justice doesn't always prevail.
Well said. Well, if you're interested in learning more about this case, we've included links to articles and other resources in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely check those out.
And as always, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating story.